spreadsheet. Dude, my mind looks exactly the same.
It was like a bad. It was like a bad. Okay, how did you get?
I'm still on recognize it.
Okay, I was just about to ask you. Okay, is it like a Thursday thing?
Yeah.
Note to self: don't go to Starbucks on Thursdays unless I have a friend.
I got a decrease of like 1.35% to like 887 kilowatts. Is that what you got?
Okay, I got. Did you get a decrease of 0.136?
I got close. Like I got pretty close to that.
Anytime Starbucks
The math is weird.
they need to like up their employees pay by like at least a couple dollars.
Like, thank you for sort of rounded differently. You said, did you finish two? Like, what if I do put off as long as I can?
Oh, I wrote.
Is it fine that I have to like it's literally filled in? I guess rather than the line graph. I just thought like this part did not over. Does it specifically have to be?
Now I know.
Or can I do one like that?
No, that's what I got. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I got. Yeah, essentially. But I also was like not confident, that's why I'm asking you around. But I was like, actually, I'll keep asking around.
If you can do the long like question, like the long typing one.
Yeah.
Where it's like it was the elasticity question.
And you would later change in Excel, like come out weird, like you couldn't put it in a percentage.
I just did like
percentage.
yeah, I just like made it a percentage on the like number thing. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, when you like convert like when I did that, it would like take my percentage, which was like correct, and turn it like 100. It would multiply by 100. Yeah.
oh yeah, so I just didn't multiply by 100 and then I just put in the percentage.
Oh. I mean, so you put it into the function.
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, do we want to do this? Is it worth it?
You're probably right. I think mine's way too low.
If you have like long, drawn out, like because some people did like bullet points for the like. Did you just do
We'll
bullet
have to do what's that number like E or whatever?
Oh, that last one? That one's that's the easiest one. Well, that's the annual rate of change, right? For natural gas, like
One where it's like I'm doing this where it's like I'm trying to do two for
When it goes from 0.11 to 12, it's like a 9.
I ever tell you what Alex said to me?
I divided
natural
it.
gas. It's it's like in
I
Ukraine.
went to Europe and I came back and I was like, where am I going to start my training?
Well, one, they're like deciding to leave like nuclear plants, and they also are like we need to be less energy dependent, which makes them want to
Which like we were like the
increase
first four,
renewables.
so
So
I was like, oh,
renewables and like
they're probably more available.
natural gas answers will be
Then
like
I
essentially
asked
flip
him
flop.
again and he told me that I was bad at my job.
Like economic,
And
like from an economic standpoint, like nothing is really viable for them because they unless they're creating more renewables because they have to import like all their natural gas and oil, so like it's never going to be economically viable to use.
Getting promoted.
Apply that to that
Also, I
side.
asked other people,
You
like
divide
other leaders, and they were like, what?
Like on the bottom of like their office page. I am also pretty good.
But isn't
Alright,
quantity
well,
point
yeah,
9?
me and Bobby both worked at like call center, and now he left. I'm trying to go to this position. Now I'm just like so like
I did it right.
He's having the idea that he wants her there. It's just like I'm confused on how to solicitation. I mean, she was like quickly, like don't spend a lot of time on it. Look up. No, how much better cheese. Yeah, he's like, he's like, okay, yeah, he's always on substance, and then add. And then I think I just, but then I thought it's embarrassed because I think I just like I just had a conversation with him like way around. I mean, I was about my job, and the entire the entire time we were having that conversation, he couldn't even look in his eye, and I'm like, and then they they're asking like this is not the first place he's ever been a general manager at either. So I'm like, this is how you have conversations with their employees, and like. Like firing people for no reason. Wait, remember Camille? Remember Camille? Because I didn't know the guy. I was like, oh, $40. That's someone I know. Johnny Tosh. And he wasn't. He couldn't go into detail, which like I hate to talk to him. Like, especially after like a certain amount of time. So we ended up talking about David's videos, but it was from Jerome, and I was like,
Everybody excited about today?
Crazy aspect to it.
I know Bruce told me he wore something crazy on Tuesday, so unfortunately it wasn't on video, so I couldn't watch it, but I do want to remind everybody there is a homework due tonight, midnight, right? 11:59 p.m. Okay, so get that homework done. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally can't hear you, I'm sorry.
What was that?
Yeah, that, I can't hear you over here.
I can't hear you either.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess I heard you somehow, yeah. Yeah, homework. HW1, 11:59 p.m. Questions on it, let us know.
All right. Okay, so today we're going to start off on levelized cost of electricity. We're going to go through the last 3 slides. Talk about those. And then we're going to have a levelized cost of electricity in-class problem that you all are going to solve, work on. I don't know how many of you looked at those last 3 slides and said, oh, I got this, this is easy. If you did, that's great. However, I don't expect most people will find it necessarily easy the first time through. So let's go through it, review kind of what this does, what this calculates. And again, as I mentioned in the last class, levelized cost of electricity is a important metric in comparing decisions as far as which plant are you going to build. Which plant is most economic, what's the least cost. This is a real good way to do that. Or I would stress it's not the only thing. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Partly, my example of the game here, you can see one reason why it isn't necessarily the only thing that we're concerned about. When it comes to the least cost to produce kilowatt hours of electricity, this is the method that you will want to employ. Okay, so what do you start with? With input costs, and the costs are in terms of capital, right? Dollars per kilowatt, right? Typical, we'll see, combined cycle plant might be $1,200, $1,300 a kilowatt. Wind plants up to about $1,600 a kilowatt. What does that mean? Well, if you build a 500 megawatt plant, $1,600 a kilowatt, that's $800 million, right? Gives you an idea. These are big investments, and some of them get into the billions very quickly. If you build a nuclear plant these days, it costs you about $4,000 a kilowatt plus. If you build a 500 megawatt one, that's $2 million, right? Okay, so that's capital. And one of the things you do with capital to put it in terms that you can start to calculate the levelized cost is you multiply it by a CCR. What's a CCR? Capital charge rate. It's basically a way of taking the capital investment and spreading it out over the lifetime of the plant. A lot of people who know a bit about finance or have taken any finance would know that when you make an investment, the cost of that investment is really the cost of borrowing the money, in the case of a private company, raising equity, and those have all kind of annual costs. And the other cost, of course, is that plant depreciates over time. And at the end of 20 or 30 years or 40 years, you better have sort of paid off the plant because it's going to be close to retirement. So this capital charge rate levelizes that capital cost so that it's stated in terms of dollars per kilowatt year. You basically multiply it by a capital charge rate. In the examples you're going to see, we use 10%, 0.1. Is that the right number always? Of course not. It's going to vary. It's going to depend on what's the cost of debt. A lot higher now than it was even 12 months ago, right? What's the cost of equity? All those sorts of things. This class, we're not going to get into all that. when you do a real sort of quote pro forma for a plan and really do a evaluation of the investment, you do get into all those details. But for this class, we're just going to assume a capital charge rate of 10%, which is pretty typical when you count depreciation and cost of equity and things like that. The second item is something called fixed O&M, and as I think I mentioned a bit in the last class, it's basically the annual fixed maintenance and labor that doesn't vary with plant operation. So let's think of it as the staff at the power plant. For a gas plant, it's a lot less than a coal plant. Coal plant is a lot less than a nuclear plant. It's a huge amount of staff for a nuclear plant. And there's also various fixed maintenance costs. Think of that as plants typically shut down maybe a couple times a year for maybe a week or two maintenance. And that can be performed by the people who are working regularly at the plant, although some of it might be variable. Some of it might happen with other outside labor. But typically, a lot of maintenance and just regular operation labor and operating costs are fixed O&M. And again, that's stated in dollars per kilowatt year. That's how it's done. And then you have variable O&M. That's something that varies with plant output, right? In a coal plant, for example, you have to scrub, put a scrubber on, which reduces the SO2, to put in NOx controls, so something called selective catalytic reduction, which reduces the NOx emissions. When you run those, you incur a charge because there's a reagent you use. In the case of scrubbers, you use limestone or lime or some other reagent. That costs money. You gotta buy that. If you are not running the plant, you don't need the lime, right? You're not running the scrubber when you're not running the plant. So you can imagine what that means is this is variable. It's moved for every, in effect, megawatt hour you produce, there's so many dollars of extra charge. So variable O&M is usually a smaller part of the O&M costs, but nonetheless, it's significant in that it varies from plant output. The fourth item, and in many cases, particularly with a fossil plant, one of the most important items is the fuel, right? Well, that clearly varies with plant output, right? You got a coal plant or natural gas plant, even a nuclear plant, you use fuel. The more you run the plant, the more fuel you need, right? Pretty straightforward. That's in dollars per million BTU. Is typically how those fuels are bought and sold. And then you have to convert it into dollars per megawatt hour. Well, that's going to depend on how efficient the plant is in converting that fuel to megawatt hours, right? We talked about the steam plants and combined cycles that are more efficient. So how do you convert it? You convert it with a heat rate we talked about, right? In the case of a typical maybe coal plant, that's about 10,000 BTUs per kilowatt hour, roughly approximately 35% efficient, let's put it that way. But a 10,000 heat rate, but a combined cycle gas plant, heat rate's closer to 7,000. It's almost 50% efficient, okay? So anyway, these are all inputs again. A fuel price, you need to assume a heat rate, depending on the plant type, and we'll use that to convert it from dollars per million BTU to dollars per megawatt hour. You can see, in fact, it's BTUs per kilowatt hour. If you multiply these two together, obviously you have to change the units a bit, right? But you multiply them together, you're going to get dollars per megawatt hour, subject to changing kilowatt hours to megawatt hours, et cetera. So that's the fourth element. So you always convert the annual capital and fixed O&M after this, you've got dollar per kilowatt year for these two, into a dollar per megawatt hour. And you have to do that based on how much you run the plant, right? Those charges are fixed, right? I just told you it doesn't vary with operation. It doesn't. But if you convert it to dollars per megawatt hour, you can imagine if you run the plant a lot, and this is basically a fixed charge, right? That dollar per megawatt hour is going to be lower. If you run it very little, it's going to be higher. So that's why you convert this to dollars per megawatt hour. You sum them all up in dollars per megawatt hour for total levelized cost. All right, so now let's look at an example. I'll bring this one in. Here we go. No, it doesn't want to work. So just do this. It's not working. There we go. That one wasn't working. All right. So here's an example of a new gas combined cycle plant. All right. So in the case of that, we've assumed the capital cost of $1,200 a kilowatt. I think it's higher now. We've seen the inflation. This is something I actually used the same cost as last year. So, but annual capital then is $1,200 times 0.1. Gives me $120 a kilowatt a year. Okay, so that's the annual capital. Fixed O&M, $30 a kilowatt a year. That's assumed cost. You add those two together, you get $150 a kilowatt a year, right? You then have to convert this to dollars per megawatt hour. So how do you do that, right? Remember up top I said their utilization, 68% capacity factor. It means it runs 68.5% of the time. Well, if you figure that out, it's a little method to my madness there. I wanted to make it so it was a nice, easy round number. And there are 8,760 hours in a year. If you multiply that by 68.5%, you're going to get 6,000 hours a year. Okay. Well, that's the key number when you start doing this machination, right? Because you want to convert dollars per kilowatt year into dollars per megawatt hour. So you need an hour in there, right? You need hours in the hours in that unit. So you have years divided by 6,000 hours. That's in 1 year, it's going to run 6,000 hours. That's the utilization factor. So basically you multiply these out, you're dividing by 6,000 hours, but you're also multiplying by 1,000 kilowatts divided by a megawatt, right? Old trick of, algebraically converting numbers. You want to take what's in fact a unitary equals 1, right? Because there are 1,000 kilowatts in a megawatt. But by doing this, we're getting rid of the kilowatts, which are on the bottom here, right? And replacing it with megawatts, which is there. Well, that's how that works, okay? So that's the conversion. Now, I will tell you, the cheating form of this is once you know the number of hours of operation per year and you have this number, right? Actually, all you have to do in this case is divide it by 6. $150 a kilowatt a year divided by 6 is going to give you $25 a megawatt hour. That's the shortcut. You take the number of hours, basically divide it by 1,000, and you put it in those units, use that as the divisor, right? That's just the shortcut calculation. Here, variable O&M is just assumed $2 a megawatt hour. And now the fuel, you have a little other set of machinations, which is, in this case, we've got a gas price of $4 a million BTU. By the way, gas has been variable until the last couple of years. Why? Well, we've had a combination with the pandemic, it sort of killed demand. Then we've had the catch up of the economy. We have had inflation. We've had the war in Ukraine, which has influenced the Russian gas market in a huge way. We've stopped seeing that gas being available to Europe, and that spilled over and impacted the US gas market, because actually the US is shipping more natural gas in the form of liquefied natural gas on tankers to Europe than it ever has before. So that has impacted the domestic natural gas market. The gas price is actually down around $2.50 to $3 right now. I say 2.50 to 3 because I have to look again. It's very volatile, right? Moving around a lot. Nonetheless, we had prices up at $8, $9, $10, not too long ago. Now the question is, where is this going to settle out, right? So I picked $4. I said $4 is probably a reasonable assumption at this point. Gas will probably get up to those levels. So if I'm building a plant, what I really want to look at is what's the fuel price I expect, say on average or levelized over that period in the future. That's why I picked $4. All right, so you take $4, so how do you get that into dollars per megawatt hour, right? Well, first, as I mentioned, you multiply it by the heat rate, 7,000 BTUs per kilowatt hour. Very efficient plant, almost 50% efficient. Then you take 1,000 kilowatt hours divided by megawatt hours, and the unitary trick there, 1,000 kilowatt hours in a megawatt hour. That's just one. So you multiply these all together. When you do that, you count for the fact that this is actually millions of BTUs, so 10 to the 6 BTUs. You've got, in effect, thousands of BTUs up here. You're multiplying it by 1,000, get it back in those units. You do all those machinations, you're going to get $28. Anyone see a shortcut here? It's the same, it's kind of the same shortcut I just told you about, except there we were dividing. Here we multiply. And the shortcut is, if I know the heat rate and I divide it by 1,000, I get 7, and I multiply it times the fuel price, and guess what? I get $28. Now, I think you should go through the calculations to convince yourself of that before you use the shortcut. But obviously, when someone asks me about a power plant cost, and this used to be in business meetings or stuff like, what would this be? And I would go, well, it's this, okay, yeah. And I could do it in my head because I did the shortcut. I couldn't possibly have done it in my head if I didn't know that shortcut. So it's useful to understand it. Okay, so now you've got $25 a megawatt hour here for the fixed charges. You got $28 for fuel. You've got $2 for variable O&M. You add all that up, you get $55 a megawatt hour, which is also 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. The reason I say 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour is when you look at retail rates, and you look at our electricity rates that people pay in their home or in their business, it's usually stated in cents per kilowatt hour. Just another way of stating basically the same number. This number is actually used in the wholesale markets. No one uses cents per kilowatt hours, they only use dollar per megawatt hour. Just a preference, just the way it's evolved over time. Okay, so that's a combined cycle. And then let me finally go with one other set of calculations, and now I won't go in the same degree of detail. You have a levelized cost of a gas combustion turbine. Okay, so because combustion turbines are primarily used for peaking load, right? Those hot days that they need more expensive units to come online to meet load. And they also have the ability to do something that most other plants can't do, which is you can turn them on literally in minutes, right? If you want to fully utilize a combined cycle plant, let alone a coal plant or a nuclear plant, you need hours to bring it up to full capacity, not just a couple of minutes. So these can be brought on quickly, and that's important because when you have unexpected load, obviously it changes at an unexpected time, right? You don't necessarily know where you're going to hit those peaks. So you need something to bring into what they call follow load, and combustion turbines do a good job with that. So this one runs, just by assumption, 500 hours a year, 5.7% of the time, obviously a peaking type operation. Same gas price, same capital charge rate. The capital is much lower, right? It's just a turbine, it's not a full-scale combined cycle, so just one basically entity. Think of it as basically have a bunch of jet engines sitting there and you're feeding them fuel, and that's all you've got, right? So $500 a kilowatt, fixed O&M is less, of course, $10 a kilowatt a year. So you add the capital and fixed O&M charges, and then you do all the machinations, and you end up with $120 a megawatt hour. Your first reaction is, why so high? Man, that's much higher than the combined cycle plant. Well, the key is, remember, it's only running 500 hours. Combined cycle plant's running 6,000 hours, 12 times as much. So just for the reason of how much is utilized, this is going to be 12 times more expensive. Well, it's not quite that because the capital itself is actually significantly lower. So there's a sort of an offset there. But basically, that's why you end up with a very high number if you're thinking of building this in terms of the cost of electricity, because you don't plan on running it very much. And you've got variable O&M, $2. Fuel calculation, notice 10,000 BTUs a kilowatt hour. Some of the better turbines now really closer to 9,000. But then again, some of the better combined cycle units are even down around 6,000. Okay, so it's going to be less efficient because it's just using one of the cycles. Using both cycles and explain why that's more efficient. So you multiply that out, now you have $40 a megawatt hour for fuel. So fuel's more expensive because it's less efficient. Capital and fixed charges are more expensive because you're not running it as much, and therefore per megawatt hour, the cost is significantly higher than, say, the combined cycle. You add that together, with variable O&M, you get 162 or 16.2 cents a kilowatt hour. So now my question to you guys is, why would you ever build this? It's 3 times as expensive as the combined cycle. Why wouldn't you just build a combined cycle instead? Anyone have any idea? Yeah.
For the reasons you mentioned earlier, how we can start up in minutes and
That's definitely one of the reasons you would, yes, be able to get it. And the other thing is that you need, in the system, you need to meet capacity requirements. So when you look at, there's a cost of capacity, amount of megawatts you have available. If you think about it just in terms of, gosh, I need so much capacity to be sure I can meet load all the time. Kind of the reserve margin I was talking about, you're gonna need extra megawatts out there. You don't expect to run them very much, but you're gonna need them, right? Then what you're doing is saying, what's the cheapest way I can get capacity, right? So a combustion turbine is a lot cheaper in dollars per kilowatt terms, right? Lots lower investment for capacity. So if you had tons of capacity in a system already, you probably tend to build the most efficient plant. On the other hand, if you didn't have much capacity, you would start filling your turbines. And that's why when you look, if you look at any of the builds that have occurred over the last 20 years and going forward, they're usually combined cycles, but there are always a few peakers in there. And it's just for this very reason. Okay. So with that said, I think we're ready for the problem. I guess we should turn the lights on. Yeah. I'm gonna leave the, you know what I'll do? Let me leave the screen on just to help.
This is exciting, you get to work on another problem. Is that what you guys all came here for today? You can see it all in your eyes, you're ready to go. Good work to do some math.
I probably do, I've probably seen it.
Let's make it to this side of the room.
So I was thinking, because I was like, my break was like 11 minutes to 20 minutes.
We'll work on that, move it around as a team, and then we'll talk about it, we'll solve it.
That's okay.
We'll have the great pleasure of solving another one on your
I think
homework
they're
next
gonna, they
time.
might honestly come again.
You can do this, you'll do the homework perfectly.
And I'm broken my rice.
I don't know. Did she eat a lot? I don't think she got much. She's broken. She's like, oh my goodness, this is really good. Not like right.
I don't, yeah.
Should we need an extra one?
Oh my god, then all my stuff.
We got extras?
She's got her little toe things. Why are they eating? Because my mom was at work. I think the other day. I recreated this picture that I took. Wait, where is it? I don't know what year it is. I think they're gonna come in because she can't pick him up from daycare in time. She's like, I'll just sleep with you. Like a dog walker, let me know. Well, the thing is all of a sudden, during my first class, like 9:30 to my other class. It's what I'm where's that file? Yeah. But I can take it out somehow when they come again.
Video was, they were seeing, they were hearing.
Writing
That helps.
we just wrote like the same thing. For like when you were like describing like economic report, that was pretty much it was all very similar answers, even for like the different types of products. The first one I said something like the US is using less oil, they're using more renewables. They said they're using more renewables. Okay. It's just all worked for most of the same things. But I don't understand how they oh, and this one it would be 7 divided by it's always 10%. That's all you're saying. For your case. Okay. Is it multiply or? He doesn't take that long. He's actually
Another something 9. I'm just gonna do it this long way because April 8. Wait, let me see if yeah, okay. So what is that? Something. Oh, okay. So to do fuel, we should do $4 again. It's like a standard thing.
Well, this says this 7,000. And then the fixed is 20. Yeah. And then you add that together.
And then we have to do on the third. I don't know where the last.
And then you just add the food and add the fixed.
Yeah. I don't understand. The last one. Oh, that just.
I did the same thing as the
You can add them, you can add in the,
So then I divide this one. 24 plus.
Oh, okay, so 24 plus 20.
oh. So, well, yeah. I should probably back it out by yours, but.
But this like does not make sense. And do the same thing for the second ask.
I don't right answer. Yeah, I listen to too. But I don't really know why it's that way.
I don't look like that, so I'm gonna ask. All right, how'd you get, everyone got it? Oh, I thought we did. Okay, wait, you guys all got it done? You guys have some fun with some math today? Everybody enjoy that? Just wait till you do the homework. It'll be even better. Yay, okay, whatever.
None of this is the homework.
Anybody wanna come up to the board and solve the problem for everybody else? They feeling energetic?
I'll do it.
There we go, that's even better. All right, so you're gonna start with alternative one, combined cycle plane, and a piece of chalk, let's find it. Oh, you found some.
Oh, it's so small.
Here, we got it.
I'll take a picture.
More than enough.
It might take a second for me to organize everything.
But you gotta be right in the middle.
I gotta be in the middle of the board?
Well, I mean, it's like tilted this direction, okay, so maybe this side.
Okay.
Heck with those people. This is the smart side of the room, right? Yeah, see?
Okay, so the first step that I thought was I should just combine like the fixed and capital
What's your name
costs.
first?
My name is Miles.
Okay, Miles, good work.
I thought like it's easier to get like the kilowatt year into dollar per megawatt hour as fast as possible. So I combined there's the capital cost. I have sweaty hands, my bad. Times the CCR, which turned out to be the 1,400.
Wait, one quick thing, you gotta make it bigger. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, I write small, my bad. I'll make it bigger.
Now we're talking. Wider too, though.
Wider?
Can you make that dot a little more dottish?
I got you, no worries.
Everyone got that?
And then the fixed cost was 28 kilowatts per year, so sorry.
Nice.
And that turned out to be 168 kilowatts per year.
Okay, so the 1,400 times 0.1 gives you 140 kilowatt years, right?
Yeah, plus the 28 kilowatts just for your fixed
28
cost.
to get the 168.
And then I wrote out the formula like this, so that's what worked for me. So 168 kilowatts over 1 year times 1 year over 7,000 hours is what it was running at. And then times 1,000 kilowatts and 1 megawatt. I just write it random. And then that gave me 24 megawatt of dollars per megawatt hour. And then at this point I just added the variable cost for to not forget it. And that was $3 per megawatt hour. And then I went into the fuel cost, which I think is the same as your example. So that was, I just used the trick.
Fuel's $4.
Here's fuel, fuel. I just used the trick where it was like 7,000 hours, then divided that by 1,000, which gave me like the 7. So then that turned into $28 per megawatt hour, and then I added these two together to get.
You just went straight to the shortcut, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And then I added these two numbers together, which this together is 27 megawatt hours, and then I added these, and then the answer is $55 per megawatt hour. That's done.
Can you put some extra lines on there so we can see how things flow together? Just kidding, actually. Actually, that's really good. Good job. Did everybody get that? Mostly? Let's go through, let's just not quickly. Good job, Miles. just to, not to clarify so much, but just to make sure everyone's on the same page on that, there were, because you put a lot of steps together, that was awesome, all right? You put a lot of steps together, but just, sometimes maybe, some people might keep this step separate, right? Which is first doing just the capital cost. So the first thing was that, Miles recognized that the capital cost is $1,400 per kilowatt, right? And it's pretty standard cost, I think, right? Yeah. And then the capital charge rate is the 0.1, so that gives you $140. So this kind of thing equals, just trying to figure out the best way to do it. So the capital cost was the $1,400 per kilowatt. And actually, one thing that you might want to just change a little bit in how you write it down, I think, is that when you do that times the 0.1, you end up with this thing, which is $140 per. Bruce kind of writes it like that, right? It's kilowatt years. It's not like kilowatts per year. No, it's kilowatt years.
What does that mean?
It is a weird thing. What's it mean? Oh.
Basically means that you spend that many dollars per kilowatt each year. That's your levelized value each year.
It sounds like kind of kilowatt per year, but it's actually, you want to think of it as kilowatt years, just because of the way you're then gonna have to do the 1 year over the 7,000 hours to get the hours out of there. So if you're really into math and you're trying to make sure you cancel the units out properly, that's one way to help with that. So then, right, you've got this $140 per kilowatt year, and what you want to keep here is the kilowatts, but you want to get rid of the years and turn it into hours, right? So kilowatt hours. So you do that with the 7,000 hours per year. You're trying to get this out, so you want the year on top. You had that exactly right, 7,000 on the bottom. And that gets you whatever 140 divided by 7,000 is, right? Some small number. You added the extra step of just doing to make that into the $24 first. Of doing, because you wanted to get the kilowatts to megawatts, so you had the
Megawatt over,
1,000 kilowatts.
over a megawatt.
Yeah. Over that, right? So now you can start just canceling year out. Not the hour to stay there, actually. And then you want to cancel the kilowatt hours, so you're left with megawatts and hours, right? Does that make sense? Just for that first one. And I think that's the 24, right?
That's 140,000 divided by 7,000.
Right?
Exactly.
Adding the 4 in on the other part. So that's just the capital cost, right? 20? Right? Yeah, 20.
I think it was 24, and then I added the 3 for the variable costs.
The extra 4 comes in with the fixed O&M, right? That's the extra $28 per kilowatt year.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you did a great job. You put those two together, right? I just sort of separated out and said, let's just do the capital one first. And then second, you would do the fixed O&M, right? Fixed operating and maintenance. Okay, so we've got this thing. This is just your capital cost. And then you're gonna have the fixed, I'll do fixed O&M over here real quick. I don't know, I'm gonna do all the capital costs over here and I'll do the variable costs over there. Okay, so fixed O&M, that's this part, $28 per kilowatt year, or $28 per kilowatt year. Oops, that's the same thing. And this is the one where you're just basically using the same exact stuff. Okay, you're trying to just get it to per megawatt hour. So you're recognizing that it's that cost over $7,000 per year first, right? I should say 7,000 hours per year. And then times 1,000 kilowatts per megawatt. sorry, I'm gonna bring it down here. Canceling some things out, so 28 divided by 7,000 times 1,000 is gonna be 4. Great, and then there's the $4 plus the $20 gives you your 24, right? And I just broke those two things apart, is that okay? Just so everyone can see them separately. And no problem with what you did, no problem at all, right? Okay, everyone good with that? Do we need to break the variable costs out? Are you guys good with that? I mean, the only trick there is this, just make sure when you're doing that, everyone, that you see how the 4 and the 7 work together, right? Maybe it's useful to look at that one really quick because there's 1,000,000 in there and 1,000 in there, right? So I'm just gonna do that one out really quick, okay? So this is sort of the variable cost for the fuel. So you started out with the $4 per, just write this as variable fuel cost. So $4 per BTU, so 1,000,000 BTUs, right? And then we want to somehow get this. So yeah, actually remember that the end game is always get it to dollars per megawatt hour. So that's what you're trying to work towards, all right? So you're trying to work towards $1 per megawatt hour so that you can add all this stuff together, right? So you gotta start working through it. How are we gonna get to that? Well, all right, so what do we know? What do we know? We know the BTUs per kilowatt hour, right? That's the heat rate. Isn't 3480, wouldn't that be like 100% efficient? And the 3480
34,
something like that.
something like that, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's
3418, you were close.
18, yeah, okay. But that just, okay, so this BTUs per kilowatt hour, as that number gets smaller, it's actually more efficient, right? It's a more efficient plant. Right, so just as keep in mind, if you get in the energy sector, you're gonna have to know that, right? That as you get closer to this sort of theoretical, I guess 3418 is kind of the theoretical maximum efficiency of any.
If every ounce of energy could somehow be converted into electricity, that would be the.
3418, yeah. So we're halfway there at 7,000, right? Okay, so you're gonna take the heat rate somehow into this, right, which is 7,000 BTUs. So I got BTUs down here, I wanna get that out of there, so I'm gonna put 7,000 BTU up here per kilowatt hour, right? Then that's the tricky part, you got this million in here, right? Because this is this million. So how do you get the millions out of there? Yeah, you just
Yeah.
put your hands up.
Oh, no, just gotta divvy it up.
Yeah, how do I do that? Well, I wanna get MBTU out, right? So I got the millions, I got the BTUs out, but I gotta get the million out somehow, right? How do I do that? Well, I just say 1 MM equals 1,000,000 down there. Isn't that right? It's gonna work out, I promise you. I did this all in advance. Better work out. That make sense? 1 MM equals 1,000,000? You guys all see that? Yay. That's gonna give me this MM out of there. And then one last little trick, I gotta get the kilowatts out of there, so it's 1,000 kilowatt hours over 1 megawatt hour. I do all that, get exactly what Miles got, which is 7. Isn't that awesome? Okay, variable fuel cost, $7. Sound good? Remember the rule of sevens? You guys all remember that? That doesn't have anything to do with this. Okay. Questions? Okay. Yeah, sorry.
I think it was 28 as the fuel cost.
Yeah, you gotta.
Well, how do I get to 7? See, rule of sevens had nothing to do with it, 28. Oh, 4 times 7. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. So 4 times 7,000 divided by 1,000,000 times 1,000 is 28. I did it all in my head. Incorrectly the first time around, correctly when corrected. Any other questions or comments? Okay, awesome. Okay, so how about the other plant, this wind power? That's an easier one, right? The wind power plant. Didn't we get to that one? You got to it? Can you come up here and put in just like one line? That's what you did before. I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'll do it, don't worry. I'll like try to get the math correct. How are we gonna do that one? Someone besides Miles. Anybody?
Multiply the capital cost by the 0.1.
Okay, so we'll start with the capital cost for the wind power. So capital cost, which was, what is it? 1,500?
Yeah.
Kilowatt times, it's the same capital charge rate, 0.1,
Yeah.
right? 0.1. So then what?
You paid 150,
Okay.
and then I added that with the fixed O&M.
Okay, so you took this and then you added in the fixed O&M.
Yeah, which is $5.
Okay, so then we'll say plus fixed O&M, so plus $5 per kilowatt year. Is that right?
Yeah.
So far?
Yeah.
And then what?
Convert it to megawatt hours.
So that's 155.
And multiply it by 1 year over 2,500 hours.
2,500 hours, okay?
And then times 1,000 over 1 megawatt.
Times 1,000 kilowatts or 1 megawatt.
And then 62.
Cancel things out. $62 per megawatt hour. For capital cost plus the fixed O&M, so all the fixed costs, 62.
And then you add the variable cost and there's no fuel, so it's 63.
Okay, so then the variable is just the $1 per megawatt, right? So total $63. Yeah, okay. That's a much easier one, I think, right? Because you don't have any fuel cost. Sorry about that over there. 63. But there will be a solution that we'll put up online, so you can look at it later as well, okay? So you have access to all these numbers done out. Okay, so I don't know, I think that might be a little high for the cost of wind power right now, actually, but maybe not. The costs have gone up the last couple of years just because it's hard to get materials.
A lot in the last year. Yeah.
So, it's interesting, if you look at the levelized cost thing, so we also have online there the Lazard's levelized cost analysis. They do every year. Lazard's puts together a really nice levelized cost analysis for these renewable energy sources. Also for the old sources. It's kind of an average number and I know that Chuck talks about that a lot. It's a pretty good source of data and information, but it was going down, but probably, for all these renewables, it's been going down a lot. In the last year or two, it's gone back up because it's just inflation. It's really,
And all the materials have gone up.
materials are expensive, these carbon fibers, yeah. So,
steel and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Okay, well, there you go. More importantly, question number two, what do you think about that one? Everyone knows who PJM is? They're gonna pay you $150 per kilowatt year for the capacity. Which source are you gonna build? Wind? Maybe the other thing, whatever it was, a combined cycle plant. What are you gonna build? Searching for capacity, yeah?
I said wind, because it perfectly reaches like the 150 kilowatts per year, like capacity that they need. And they said they would pay over that so I can make a profit on it and it won't have any additional fuel costs.
You wanna think about that answer for a little bit?
I can.
It's actually a good answer, but think about what capacity is. I mean, the way you actually described that was pretty good, right? Because you're thinking through it economically, but what's capacity? This is the hardest thing about this, is what capacity, right? So when Bruce talks about capacity, what does he mean?
Like the amount of energy required, like that's needed.
So yeah, but it's the amount of electricity needed, and see if I get this right. So I'm gonna say this and Bruce will tell me if I'm right. It's the amount of electricity that you need at any given moment, right?
Right.
It's at any given moment thing you have to think about. That's the thing about capacity. Would you change your answer if you thought about at any given moment?
Well, yeah, wind is unreliable.
Right. That's so wind can't actually be capacity, right? That's a trick question, this question a little bit.
The way they actually rate capacity, and they won't give you much capacity credit for wind. They'll give you some because certainly probabilistically it might be available.
Right.
But you can't count on it. And combined cycle, pretty much, 99% available, So it's gonna get paid the $150 a kilowatt year, while, and by the way, it will make a profit if it gets paid $150 a kilowatt year, which covers kind of its fixed costs. It's gonna make a profit on its variable costs, right? Because at some hours, the price is gonna be higher than their variable costs. At some hours, they'll be right there, but so they'll make a net profit that way. So they're more than willing to do it.
Does that make sense? I mean, it's really important for folks to understand what capacity is in that regard. Capacity really is kind of at any given moment, right? You have to be able to flick the switch and turn it on when the grid needs capacity. So in the summertime, when it's really, really hot, is that plant gonna be able to flip on, like, within a few hours, right? And be turned on and be producing electricity to provide electricity for those extra 50 homes that cranked up the AC, right?
It's one of the main reasons that when you see kind of the builds out of renewables, you've also started to see a demand for batteries or other storage so that you can, in effect, add capacity that way. And you're very much willing, in the case of something like that, for example, to take the losses that you'll get. Because when you store something and use it, there's a loss factor associated with that. So that you're willing to do that because the capacity can be so valuable.
So bear in mind that if you're someone who has these batteries, right, and I don't know, you must have shown the pictures of different pricing at different times, right? So yeah, electricity comes at different prices at different times, right? So if you're in the middle of summertime, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, everybody gets home from work, cranks up the AC, or they're all just working in their house in their underwear, they're all gonna be cranking up the AC as well, right? And that's the time of day you need them, and the price is gonna be there too, right?
I showed this chart actually the first day of the futures and options class, pointing out how volatile electricity prices are. And if you look over the last just couple of years, you've had prices, even on some days, reach $1,000 a megawatt hour. And then other days, it's only $10 a megawatt hour. It can really vary a lot if you get very, very short on capacity. So capacity has a lot of value, depending on where you are. I mean, what region you're in, et cetera. But
You guys good with that? Just if you hear capacity, don't think wind or solar. Think batteries are capacity, think, something that can turn on pretty quickly.
the concept too is you're being paid if you're, supplying capacity to the grid. You're being paid basically to be available. You're not being paid to operate. I mean, you might operate, in which case you would get an energy thing, but simply you're getting paid because you're there.
Okay, now the harder question, number 3, when you decide to build that combined cycle plant, now you can bid the plant into the daily or hourly market. What's the minimum price you're gonna bid? It's an even trickier question, if you can believe it. So sure. Thanks, man. Sorry about that. It's unfortunate. Just kidding. What do we got? What's the minimum price? Minimum price? Got it worked out? It's up there on the board somewhere. Could be anywhere, really. You're gonna search out for it.
Probably wherever your fixed costs are.
Which ones?
Probably your fixed costs plus whatever, just fixed costs plus capital.
What do you say?
Say it again.
The fixed costs plus the capital. If you're not writing the plan, you don't have those variable costs.
We're hard about that. Really hard about that, yeah?
Would it be the fuel price per megawatt hour?
Okay. Getting closer. Yeah?
Would it be the total cost of electricity?
No. Getting colder.
You were very warm, now you're cold.
Yeah, this is really hard. So you're on something, Luke. It's the other way around though. It's the variable cost. So you're right, and that's part of it, but it's the full variable cost, right? It's the full variable cost. So you have to add together the 2 variable costs there, which is the fuel cost plus the variable O&M, I think, right? So $3 per megawatt hour. So it would be the fuel, which is 28, plus the variable, which is 3, which is 30. It must be $31, right?
Yeah, you'll make money, if you will, if the price is, infinitesimally above that total variable cost, then you'll make money. So you're not gonna be willing to bid in less than that, because if you operate, you bid in less than that, you might end up with a price where you'll lose money, right? So you're not gonna operate when you'll lose money. Now, it's a little more complicated in the way we've described it, because in truth, people have to figure out when they're gonna bring their plants up, and they can't just bring them up instantaneously, so they might be bidding lower in order to get dispatched sooner, so that they will then make money later in a later hour. So you will see some lower bids as a result of that. But the simple answer, assuming you could run plants, bring them up quickly, like within minutes, would be use your variable costs.
This is variable cost, yeah. So all of you who are in like business, any kind of business management class, like you learn like the shutdown condition for a factory or something, right? It's exactly the same as a shutdown condition for the factory. Like, when do you shut the factory down? It's when you're no longer making enough money to cover the variable costs, right? And why is that? It's, your fixed costs are you have to pay those no matter what. Like, if you have a loan,
Already spent.
yeah, it's already money you've spent. So if you've got a loan, you're gonna be paying that whether the plant is operating or not, right? But if you turn the plant on and you're not making enough money to cover your variable costs, then you're just stupid. I shouldn't say that, but you just are, right? Is that basically it?
And the other side of that, which we don't really say, is that it really doesn't make sense to bid in something much above your variable cost, because then you're losing opportunities that you might get dispatched at a slightly higher price than your variable costs. Now, say you were dispatching, let's say we're at, what, for this one, it's 20, that's the capital. What's the variable, that's 20.
It's 28 plus, it's just 28 plus the 3.
31.
31, yeah.
So you would bid in 31. If, for example, you said, oh, I really want to get more, so I'll bid in 35. Well, what if the market settles at 33? You're not running, and you're losing an opportunity to make $2 a megawatt hour. So typically, it's not only the minimum price, it's almost also the maximum price that you should bid it.
Yeah.
You bid in minimum cost. Are you making profit still?
Well, I mean, if you bid in exactly 31 and you get paid 31, then you're no longer losing, you're not losing money. You're losing the same amount of money you would have lost if you hadn't bid anything in.
Remember, there's some probability, pretty likely in most hours, that the price will be a little higher than 31. You don't know what the price is before you bid it in until it settles out. When you bid it in, it gets selected, and all of a sudden, a plant says at $35 is setting the price on the market. Yep.
Yes, I mean, that's the tricky part about it, is you could actually bid in at 31, but then if the price is 35, you're getting paid the 35.
Yeah.
So it's strategic, right? Because you have to think, okay, I'm competing with other people to be the next one that turns on. I want to make sure I turn on it above 31, right? I want to turn on it below 31. So you have to kind of strategically think about your bid on that. So you don't want to be below 31 necessarily, although Bruce pointed out that sometimes you might do that because you're sort of imagining the price or taking a risk the price is going to go up in the next hour and you're on. That way you're going to get paid that higher price even though you bid in 29. Make sense? I mean, it's just a strategic sort of decision you're going to have to make.
What do you suppose that renewable sources like wind and solar typically bid?
Much lower.
Zero.
Much lower.
Yeah.
In fact, they actually typically bid just zero. Because they're gonna run when they're available. When the wind's blowing, when it's not blowing, they're not running. But it's basically nature that determines where the sun is shining, the solar unit's running.
Yeah, Miles, Tim?
What happens like if your bid is like just breaking even, but you still have all these like fixed costs that you have to pay at the end of the?
Remember, you have to pay those no matter what. That's kind of the point on the sort of shutdown condition or startup condition for electricity plants is you have to pay those fixed costs regardless of whether your plant is on or off, right? That's the whole sort of concept of the fixed cost. So you're okay with that because you're gonna be paying that whatever it was, it's happening no matter what.
You could decide to shut the plant down because just an example are some of the nuclear plants that where the maintenance, those fixed costs every year got really high for some of these plants, these older nuclear units. And they said, we can't make a profit in the long run. They're still gonna try and run as much as they can until they shut down, and they're gonna use the nuclear fuel price basically to set that, and it'll be very low, like $7 a megawatt hour or something like that. So, but you make a determination whether to shut down based on what you project is likely over the next year. How much revenue are you gonna get when you operate? And, within obviously some uncertainty, and then you see, all right, well, can I make enough revenue to cover all these fixed costs that I have? So at that point, you're right. You want to make sure you're not, in the long run, losing money. But in the short run, you're always looking at variable costs.
So would you like incorporate that into your, like when you're bidding, would you incorporate like, okay, well, I need my minimum to just like not to break even, but I also need like a certain percentage to like.
No, because you're always making money on the margin with your variable costs. And whatever you do in the short run, it doesn't impact how much fixed O&M costs you have to pay, right? So that's kind of self-defeating. If you push your price up too much to cover your fixed costs, you end up not running enough and missing out on some profits that you really would need to cover your fixed O&M. Yeah.
So are the plants getting paid both for their bid and then also in the previous question where PJM is paying them? So is that two separate forms of income or is it?
Yeah, it can be. PJM actually has a capacity market. I kind of talked about that a little bit, that most markets don't have capacity markets. PJM is one of the RTOs that actually does have a capacity market. And people bid in ahead of time into that market. They bid the capacity price and then that sets it for, a future year. And they do it out several years. Okay, so it's kind of a long run thing. And typically it is not enough to cover all your fixed costs, which sort of makes sense if you think about it, because remember, you have a low cost plant for the capacity, like a combined cycle unit or also a coal unit or a nuclear unit. Those, and you could bid into the capacity market, you're still counting on some profits and revenues from the hourly energy market, in effect, to help cover those costs. If that makes sense.
Complicated stuff. So I think like key things to sort of take away, one is the calculation of the levelized cost, right? Because, and the importance of that is that later on, when we get to the renewable energy section in particular, you got, have a guest speaker like Chuck Zebula here, he's just gonna be throwing up, levelized cost numbers at you. So you're gonna know where they came from, right? So that's a good thing to have. And then, it is an important concept if you're sort of looking, at investments and things like that in the electricity sector. So that cost calculation is just useful to know. So know that, all right? And then this sort of, what is capacity, right? Now we all know what capacity is, so keep that in mind. That it's gotta be on demand, electricity has to be available, right? And then the third thing is this kind of shutdown condition. Variable costs really matter a lot, right? I think those are the three things you really want to carry away, okay? Now, the answer for this will be online, so you can look at the numbers there too, okay? Got a homework due tonight, midnight, 11:59. If anyone has to be late with the homework, you can be late, just get 5% off today, okay? So feel free to be late.
I gotta feel that. I just text me legible, you don't even have to just write. I looked over, that's good. You could just like June, when I'm born, it's really so rude. Yeah, that's already. So everything together, this is what I
It's just sucks. He's just going through a lot of stuff like personal life.
All right, we're gonna get you all set up for recording.
Yeah, I haven't heard about how it is.
So I'm gonna be reading from
Yeah.
Okay, if you want, if you have something on there, I can put it on here, unless it's easier. Oh, yeah, sure.
Just make sure
Sorry to be rushing you here.
Yeah, so if you have anything